Discrimination reared its ugly head in a financial institution where prejudice met swift justice. A bank manager's racially motivated decision to have a black woman removed from the premises backfired spectacularly, resulting in his immediate termination with a single phone call. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The marble floors of Peachtree Avenue's flagship bank glistened under the harsh Atlanta summer sun, reflecting the oppressive heat that seemed to seep through the revolving glass doors, despite the building's powerful air conditioning. Marcus Carter, the branch manager, stood behind his mahogany desk, his usually confident demeanor replaced by visible agitation as he gripped his smartphone with trembling hands. His knuckles whitened around the device while he punched in 3 numbers that would change everything. "Yes. I need police at Peachtree Financial immediately," he whispered urgently, his voice tight with tension. "We have a situation." His eyes darted nervously across the lobby toward the woman who had disrupted his carefully ordered world. Amara Williams stood in the center of the marble expanse, a portrait of composed dignity in her impeccably tailored navy suit. Unlike the branch manager's obvious distress, her posture remained perfectly straight. Her expression an unreadable mask that revealed nothing of her thoughts. The executive's calm defiance created an almost magnetic field around her, drawing curious and concerned glances from customers who had fallen into a collective hush. "She's refusing to leave after I've asked repeatedly," Marcus continued, lowering his voice further as beads of sweat formed along his hairline. The security guard, David Johnson, hovered uncertainly between the two opposing forces, his hand resting on his belt, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating tension. Patricia Bennett watched the scene unfold from her desk near the entrance, her fingers frozen over her keyboard. The assistant had worked with Amara for 3 years and had never seen such a public confrontation, though she recognized the quiet determination in her employer's eyes. In that suspended moment, with every eye in the room fixed upon her, Amara calmly reached into her designer handbag. The movement was unhurried, deliberate. She withdrew her device, unlocked it with a single swipe, and scrolled to a contact labeled simply "Regional." Her manicured finger hovered over the screen for just a second, a moment of decision, before pressing call. The connection was immediate. "This is Amara Williams," she stated, her voice clear enough to carry across the suddenly silent lobby. "I'm at the Peachtree branch. The situation we discussed has escalated exactly as predicted." "Yes, he's calling police now." She maintained unwavering eye contact with Marcus as she spoke, watching recognition dawn on his face, followed quickly by uncertainty, and then unmistakable fear. The branch manager's world began to unravel with each word she spoke, the power he thought he wielded evaporating into the chilled bank air. The faint wail of sirens grew steadily louder outside the Peachtree Avenue branch. Marcus Carter straightened his tie with trembling fingers, desperately clinging to the last vestiges of his authority. Beads of sweat formed along his hairline as he surveyed the lobby that had fallen eerily silent. Customers stood frozen, their transactions forgotten, all eyes darting between him and the composed woman in navy. "David," Amara Williams addressed the security guard calmly, "I believe we both know this situation doesn't require police intervention." David Johnson shifted uncomfortably, his hand hovering near the radio clipped to his belt. The security guard's eyes betrayed his internal struggle. Follow the branch manager's orders or trust his instincts that something wasn't right. "Ma'am, he began, his voice catching. "It's Executive Vice President Williams," Amara corrected him gently. She didn't raise her voice, yet her words carried across the marble floor with unmistakable authority. "And I've just spoken with the regional director." From her desk near the entrance, Patricia Bennett watched the scene unfold with a mixture of anxiety and awe. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of her desk. As Amara's assistant for nearly 5 years, she had always admired her boss's composure. But this was different. This was power in action. Marcus made a desperate attempt to regain control. "This is still my branch," he insisted, his voice cracking slightly. "And then I've determined that you're disrupting business operations." A soft chime from Amara's device interrupted him. She glanced at the screen, then looked up with quiet confidence. "Not anymore, Marcus." The branch manager's face drained of color as his own phone buzzed in his pocket. He fumbled to retrieve it, reading the message with widening eyes. Patricia noticed how the atmosphere in the room had transformed. Customers who had initially backed away were now inching closer. Sensing the shift, bank tellers exchanged meaningful glances. Even David seemed to stand straighter, his hand dropping away from his radio. "The regional director would like to speak with you," Amara said, gesturing toward the manager's office. "I suggest you take that call privately." Marcus Carter looked around wildly, searching for allies and finding none. The lobby that had been his domain for 7 years now felt foreign, as if the very walls had transferred their allegiance. Patricia caught Amara's eye across the room and gave an almost imperceptible nod of support. The assistant had witnessed countless meetings, negotiations, and confrontations, but never had she seen such a complete reversal of fortune in a single moment. As Marcus retreated toward his office, shoulders slumped in defeat, the approaching sirens finally reached the bank entrance. David Johnson moved toward the door, ready to explain to the officers that their services were no longer required. 20 minutes after the confrontation on the bank floor, the regional director's office buzzed with frantic energy. Amara Williams's single phone call had bypassed the usual chain of command, reaching the executive vice president directly. The swift response was unprecedented. Marcus Carter's security badge was deactivated remotely, his computer access terminated, and his authority stripped away with clinical efficiency. "I can't believe this is happening," muttered one of the assistants, watching as IT specialists locked down Carter's digital footprint throughout the system. Inside the glass-walled conference room, 3 senior executives huddled over their devices, their faces drawn with concern. The bank's reputation was at stake, and damage control had become their only priority. One of them kept refreshing the social media feeds, wincing at each new mention of the incident. "We need a statement ready within the hour," the communications director insisted, her voice strained as she paced the length of the polished table. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the analytics department, Sarah Evans hunched over her keyboard, her fingers flying across the keys with determined precision. The young analyst had been monitoring the situation since the first alert hit the internal messaging system. While others scrambled to contain the public relations nightmare, she saw an opportunity to investigate something that had bothered her for months. Sarah pulled up the customer complaint database, applying filters to extract records from the past 3 years. She cross-referenced the data with branch locations, customer demographics, and resolution outcomes. As the information populated her screen, a chill ran down her spine. "This can't be coincidental," she whispered to herself. Leaning closer to the monitor, the pattern was undeniable. Complaints filed by customers of color were systematically marked as resolved, with minimal follow-up. Many had Marcus Carter's digital signature on the dismissal forms, but he wasn't alone. The institutional pattern extended across multiple branches and managers. Sarah glanced around nervously, then saved the data to a secure folder. This information could explain why Amara Williams had reacted so decisively. Perhaps she had already suspected what Sarah was now confirming with hard numbers. Back in the executive suite, Amara stood calmly before the regional director, articulating her experience with unwavering clarity. Her navy suit remained crisp despite the day's tension, her composure unshaken. "This isn't about one incident," she explained. "This is about a pattern of behavior that undermines everything this institution claims to stand for." The regional director nodded slowly, beginning to understand that today's crisis might be just the visible tip of a much larger, more troubling iceberg, one that Sarah Evans was already mapping in meticulous detail. By dawn, the confrontation at Peachtree Avenue's flagship bank had transformed from a local incident into a national flashpoint. A 20-second video, captured on the shaking smartphone of Tasha Robinson, a regular customer who happened to be opening a small business account that morning, spread across social media platforms with the speed and force of wildfire. The footage showed Marcus Carter, his face tense with misplaced authority, speaking urgently into his desk phone while gesturing toward Amara Williams. "I need officers here immediately." His voice echoed clearly in the marble lobby. The camera panned to Amara, standing perfectly still in her navy suit, chin raised slightly, refusing to be moved or intimidated as other customers watched in uncomfortable silence. By 9 in the morning, the clip had been viewed over 200,000 times. By noon, that number had quadrupled. News outlets picked up the story, their headlines growing increasingly pointed: "Banking while black" and "Power Shift, how one executive stood her ground." The bank's investor relations department found their lines jammed with concerned shareholders and furious community members. Patricia Bennett, fielding calls at her desk outside Amara's office, watched the notification counter on her screen climb relentlessly. Her hands trembled slightly as she sorted through the messages, separating media requests from board inquiries. "It's getting worse," Patricia said, placing a stack of message slips on Amara's desk. "The chairman called 3 times already." Amara nodded, her expression betraying nothing as she scrolled through her own device. The executive had spent the morning in back-to-back crisis calls, her voice never rising despite the mounting pressure. She paused on a particularly vicious comment thread, then set the phone face down on her polished desk. "They're calling for Marcus's termination," Patricia continued, "and the board wants a statement by 2 o'clock. "They'll have it," Amara replied, her calm demeanor intact, despite knowing that every word she uttered from now on would be scrutinized, every decision questioned. The regional director had already called twice, his tone shifting from accusatory to conciliatory as the public narrative solidified in Amara's favor. Outside the bank's downtown headquarters, a small group of protesters had gathered, their signs demanding accountability and change. Local news vans lined the curb, reporters standing ready with microphones and practiced expressions of concern. Amara Williams stood at her office window, watching the scene unfold below. She had won the first battle, but the war for true institutional change was just beginning. The board, the public, the media, all would be watching her next moves with microscopic attention. She straightened her jacket and turned toward her computer. There was work to be done. The Atlanta skyline cast long shadows through the glass-walled conference room as Amara Williams stood at the head of the polished mahogany table. She had called this emergency board meeting less than 24 hours after the incident, refusing to let speculation and rumors dictate the narrative. The 12 board members, mostly older men in expensive suits, shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. "These aren't isolated incidents," Amara said, her voice steady as she advanced to the next slide in her presentation. "Our own data shows a 37% disparity in loan approval rates between different neighborhoods in Atlanta." She maintained eye contact with each board member, even as Chairman Robert Wilson's frown deepened with each statistic she presented. "Ms. Williams, the chairman interrupted, adjusting his gold cufflinks. "These numbers lack context. Market forces and credit histories explain most of these discrepancies." Amara didn't flinch. "I've controlled for those variable bandachensa. The pattern remains statistically significant." She gestured toward the graphs displaying customer service complaints sorted by zip code. "Our clients deserve better." From his seat near the middle of the table, Tom Harris watched the exchange with rapt attention. As the newly appointed regional manager, he had expected his first month to involve learning protocols and meeting branch managers, not navigating a public relations crisis that threatened the bank's reputation. His notebook remained open, but blank. He was too focused on the power dynamics unfolding before him. "The public is demanding accountability," Amara continued, switching to slides showing social media reactions to the viral video. "We have an opportunity to lead genuine change in the industry." Patricia Bennett quietly entered with a stack of reports, distributing them efficiently before taking a seat against the wall behind her boss. The assistant's eyes briefly met Tom's, conveying a silent message of solidarity. "What exactly are you proposing?" asked Diane Foster, one of the few female board members. Amara outlined her three-point plan: a transparent review of past complaints, mandatory training for all customer-facing staff, and a community advisory council with real input on policy. "We can turn this crisis into meaningful reform," she concluded. Chairman Wilson leaned forward. "And the cost to shareholders?" "The cost of inaction will be far greater," Amara replied without hesitation. As the debate intensified, Tom's mind raced. He recognized the crossroads before him: support Amara's bold reforms and potentially make powerful enemies, or align with the old guard and preserve his career trajectory. The executive glanced at his smartphone, where news alerts about the bank continued to multiply. When the meeting finally adjourned, Tom approached Amara as she gathered her materials. "Bold presentation," he said, keeping his voice neutral. She looked up, measuring his intentions. "And where do you stand, Mr. Harris?" Tom hesitated only briefly. "I believe balance is possible, protecting our reputation while making meaningful changes." Amara nodded, her expression revealing nothing. "We'll see where everyone stands when the real work begins." That afternoon, Amara Williams stood at the podium in a modest branch tucked away in one of Atlanta's underserved neighborhoods. Sunlight streamed through dusty windows as she unveiled the Community First initiative, her voice steady despite the commotion outside. Through the glass doors, protesters waved signs, some supporting her, others demanding the bank address years of discriminatory practices. "This isn't just about one incident," she explained to the small crowd of local business owners who had gathered inside. "It's about rebuilding trust that should never have been broken in the first place." Amara moved through the room afterward, her navy suit a stark contrast to the worn carpet beneath her feet. She shook hands with Darnell Jenkins, a barbershop owner who'd been denied loans 3 times despite his excellent credit score. "We're going to change how financing decisions are made," she promised him, maintaining eye contact. "Your business plan deserves fair consideration, not assumptions based on your zip code." Across the room, David Johnson stood near the entrance, his security uniform pressed, but his conscience wrinkled with regret. The guard watched Amara's confident interactions while mentally reviewing the new protocols he'd been drafting since the incident at Peachtree Avenue. His fingers unconsciously traced the outline of his badge, the same badge he'd failed to use properly when Marcus Carter had summoned police. "You're doing good work here," said an elderly woman who approached Amara with a weathered business plan for a community bakery. "But we've heard promises before." The executive nodded, understanding the skepticism. That's why we're backing words with immediate action. Applications submitted today will receive responses within 48 hours, not weeks. Outside, the chants grew louder. A local news van pulled up, and David tensed, moving toward the door. His training told him to restrict media access, but something stopped him. The security officer remembered Amara's unwavering stance in the lobby that day, how she'd refused to be intimidated. "Let them in," Amara called to him, noticing his hesitation. "Transparency starts today." David nodded, holding the door open for the reporters. As they entered, a weight lifted from his shoulders. Never again would he stand silently while injustice unfolded before him. The guard had spent nights replaying his inaction, knowing he could have de-escalated the situation instead of following Marcus Carter's lead. As the afternoon progressed, Amara fielded tough questions while continuing to connect with community members. David watched her, drawing strength from her example. In his pocket, he carried his revised security protocols, ones that prioritized dignity over intimidation. Tomorrow, he would present them to Tom Harris. Regardless of the consequences, Patricia Bennett sat alone in her dimly lit apartment, the glow of her laptop screen illuminating her troubled face. For 6 years, she had served as Amara Williams's assistant, admiring the executive's unwavering integrity and calm determination. But tonight, Patricia found herself caught in an impossible position. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she reread the confidential memo she'd spent hours drafting. The document contained detailed accounts of discrimination she had witnessed at the bank, instances where customers had been treated differently based on their appearance, where loan applications had mysteriously stalled, where Marcus Carter had established an unspoken hierarchy of service. "This could cost me everything," Patricia whispered to herself, rubbing her tired eyes. Her modest apartment, the college fund for her nephew, her health insurance, all depended on her job at the bank. She had worked too hard to reach her position, climbing from teller to executive assistant through years of dedication. The memo contained 23 specific incidents spanning the past 3 years. Patricia had meticulously documented dates, times, and witnesses where possible. She knew the information would strengthen Amara's case, perhaps even protect her from the mounting pressure from the board. But bank policy was clear. Sharing internal information outside proper channels was grounds for immediate termination. Patricia poured herself another cup of tea and walked to the window, looking out at the Atlanta skyline. She thought about her grandmother, who had cleaned bank offices at night for 30 years, always telling her, "Do what's right, even when no one's watching." But what was right in this tangled situation? Her phone buzzed with a message from Tom Harris. "Meeting moved to 9 tomorrow. Board wants answers." The regional manager had been surprisingly supportive of Amara, but Patricia knew his position was precarious too. She returned to her laptop and added one final paragraph, detailing how David Johnson, the security guard, had confided in her about being instructed to follow certain customers more closely than others. Her finger hovered over the send button, the cursor blinking like a metronome, counting down her decision. If she sent this to Amara, she would become an official whistleblower. If she deleted it, she might preserve her career but betray both her boss and her principles. Patricia took a deep breath, remembering how Amara had stood unflinching in that marble lobby, refusing to be intimidated. "Loyalty," Patricia murmured, "isn't about protecting institutions. It's about standing with people who do what's right." With a decisive click, Patricia made her choice, then closed her laptop. Whatever tomorrow brought, she would face it knowing she had chosen her side in this quiet battle for justice. Sarah Evans stared at her computer screen, her eyes burning from hours of meticulous analysis. The spreadsheet before her told a disturbing story, not just one incident, But 47 complaints similar to Amara Williams's case had been systematically buried over the past 3 years. Each dismissal followed the same pattern: minimal investigation, cursory responses, and eventual archiving without resolution. "This can't be coincidence," she whispered, saving her findings to a secure drive. The analyst knew she needed help to bring this to light properly. With trembling fingers, she composed an email to Michael Reed, a journalist known for his integrity at the Atlanta Tribune. They met at a small coffee shop 10 blocks from the bank. Sarah chose a corner table, nervously adjusting her glasses as she waited. When Michael arrived, his reassuring smile immediately put her at ease. "I've been following the Amara Williams story," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "But you're suggesting there's much more beneath the surface." The analyst nodded, sliding a flash drive across the table. "Wish everything's here: dates, complaint numbers, resolution codes. I've removed personal identifiers, but the pattern is unmistakable." Michael's eyes widened as she explained the data. His questions were precise, thoughtful, challenging her to consider angles she hadn't explored. "What made you decide to come forward?" he finally asked. "Because it could have been me," Sarah admitted, "or my mother, or my sister." Their first meeting stretched to 3 hours, and by the end, something had shifted between them. The journalist's passion for truth mirrored her own dedication to justice. Over the following weeks, they met regularly, sometimes at quiet restaurants, other times walking through Piedmont Park, always careful to maintain discretion. Michael helped her understand how to document evidence properly, while she provided context for the banking industry's internal practices. "You're risking your career," he reminded her one evening as they sat on a park bench, the Atlanta skyline glittering before them. Sarah tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Some things matter more than job security." Their professional collaboration gradually evolved into something more personal. Brief touches, lingering glances, conversations that drifted from bank policies to favorite books and childhood memories. Yet both remained cautious, aware of the complicated ethics of their situation. With each new piece of evidence they uncovered, Sarah's determination grew stronger. She began arriving early to work, staying late to comb through archived records, building an irrefutable case. The more she discovered, the more she realized that exposing the truth might cost her everything, but remaining silent would cost her soul. Tom Harris adjusted his tie as he stepped out of his vehicle into the sweltering Atlanta heat. Headquarters had been breathing down his neck since the incident with Amara Williams, demanding he conduct a thorough assessment of all branches in the city's outskirts. As the newly appointed regional manager, he knew his reputation hinged on how he handled this crisis. The first branch he visited sat between a laundromat and a convenience store in a predominantly black neighborhood. Inside, the stark contrast to the marble floors of Peachtree Avenue was immediately apparent. The facility was functional but dated, with fewer staff members despite the line of waiting customers. "We're doing our best with what we have," the branch manager explained defensively when Tom inquired about their loan approval rates. But the numbers told a different story. Applications from this neighborhood were rejected at 3 times the rate of those from affluent areas, even when applicants had comparable credit scores. At the second branch, located in a Hispanic community, Tom discovered similar patterns. Loan interest rates averaged 2 percentage points higher than in downtown locations. When he questioned this disparity, the manager shrugged. "These clients are higher risk," she insisted, sliding a folder across her desk. "It's just business." Tom felt his stomach tighten. He'd been in banking for 15 years, but seeing the evidence laid bare like this made him uncomfortable. By his 4th branch visit, the pattern was undeniable. Customers in minority neighborhoods faced more hurdles, stricter terms, and less personal attention. That evening, Tom sat in his apartment reviewing his notes. The branch manager's explanations echoed in his mind, all variations of, "This is how it's always been done," or "We're just following protocol." Their defensiveness revealed how deeply entrenched these practices were. He thought about Amara Williams standing her ground in that bank lobby, about Sarah Evans diligently compiling data that exposed uncomfortable truths, about David Johnson caught between duty and doing what was right. Tom opened his laptop and began drafting a comprehensive report. Policy memos and diversity seminars wouldn't fix this. The system itself needed restructuring, loan approval criteria, branch resource allocation, staff training, everything. He knew this report might make him unpopular with certain board members. His career advancement could stall, but as he typed, Tom realized something Amara Williams had already discovered. Real change required more than procedural adjustments. It required courage. Tom saved the document and closed his eyes. Tomorrow, he would present his findings to the board, and he would stand behind every word. The crisp October air swept through Atlanta as Amara Williams stood before her team, unveiling the bank's newest initiative. The feedback portal had been her brainchild, a direct channel for clients to share their experiences without filters or gatekeepers. "This isn't just about compliance," she explained, her navy suit contrasting sharply with the autumn-themed decorations in the conference room. "It's about hearing voices that have been silenced for too long." Within 4 hours of launch, the portal had collected over 300 submissions. Amara sat alone in her office, scrolling through message after message on her device. Some stories made her wince, accounts of loan officers who wouldn't make eye contact, of explanations too technical to understand, of dreams deferred by arbitrary requirements. Others offered glimmers of hope, tales of branch managers who had gone the extra mile, of financial literacy workshops that had transformed lives. Patricia entered with coffee, noticing her boss's furrowed brow. "That bad?" she asked, placing the cup on the desk. "Not bad," Amara replied. "Real, finally, real." She gestured to the screen where testimonials continued to pour in. "These aren't just complaints, Patricia. They're a roadmap for everything we need to fix." The executive stayed late that evening, categorizing responses and drafting action plans. Tom Harris had initially questioned the wisdom of opening such a direct line to customers, fearing a flood of negativity. But even he couldn't deny the value of what they were receiving. Just before midnight, as Amara prepared to leave, a new notification appeared. The message came from Ruth Williams, a name that made her pause. Her father's sister, a woman she'd met only at family reunions, someone who rarely spoke of personal matters. 43 years ago, the message began, I walked into the Peachtree branch to open a business account. I had saved for 2 years. Selling handmade quilts from my living room. The manager laughed in my face, said my little hobby didn't qualify as a business. I left in tears, never returned to any bank for 7 years. Today, I saw your face on the news. My own blood leading the change. I need to know, is it real this time or just pretty words to quiet the storm? Amara's hands trembled as she read the message twice more. She had never known this story, this wound that her aunt had carried silently for decades. The personal connection transformed everything, turning abstract principles into family history. She reached for her phone and dialed a number she rarely used. Some answers couldn't wait until morning. The journalists arrived like vultures, circling the bank's headquarters with microphones and cameras. Amara Williams knew a statement was inevitable. She summoned her crisis team to the glass-walled conference room, where tension hung thick in the air. They're demanding answers, Patricia Bennett said, sliding a folder of press inquiries across the polished table. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution is running a front-page story tomorrow, regardless of our input. Amara nodded, surveying the anxious faces around her. Tom Harris leaned forward, his expression grave. Legal advises minimal disclosure. We acknowledge the incident without admitting fault, then pivot to our existing diversity initiatives. That's corporate speak for saying nothing, Sarah Evans interjected. The young analyst had been working late nights, compiling evidence of systemic issues. People saw that video. They know what happened. Transparency is our only path forward. The room erupted into heated debate. Junior executives sided with legal, fearing shareholder backlash. Others, emboldened by Sarah's conviction, argued for honesty. Enough, Amara said quietly, her voice cutting through the chaos. I'll address this personally. 2 hours later, she sat under the harsh studio lights of Atlanta's Channel 9 News. The makeup artist had just finished touching up her face when the red light blinked on. We're speaking with Amara Williams, Executive Vice President at Peachtree National Bank, about the incident that's gone viral. The anchor began, her tone professionally skeptical. Miss Williams, what exactly happened that day? Amara took a deep breath. What happened was unacceptable. A valued customer was treated with suspicion and disrespect. That incident reflects systemic problems within our institution that I take personal responsibility for addressing. The anchor's eyebrows rose, clearly surprised by the candor. We're implementing immediate reforms, Amara continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Mandatory bias training for all staff, a review of all customer complaint records, and a new community advisory board with real power to guide our practices. Back at headquarters, Patricia watched the broadcast with the team, her hands clasped tightly. When Amara acknowledged past failures without equivocation, several executives visibly winced. She's committing corporate suicide, one whispered. But by morning, the gamble showed signs of paying off. Community leaders cautiously praised the bank's transparency. Social media buzzed with surprised approval. Even some shareholders expressed relief at the decisive handling. Yet the scrutiny intensified. Investigative reporters began digging into the bank's lending practices. Regulators requested meetings. Competitors watched closely, ready to capitalize on any misstep. As Amara stepped off the elevator the next morning, Patricia handed her a thick folder. The board wants an emergency meeting, she said quietly, and there are 8 more interview requests. Amara nodded. The real work was just beginning. The bank's stock plummeted 8% in a single trading day. Inside the oak-paneled boardroom, tension crackled as executives stared at the downward-sloping graphs projected on the wall. Amara Williams sat calmly at the table's center, absorbing the accusations being hurled at her from all directions. "That this publicity nightmare is entirely your doing," said the silver-haired chairman, jabbing his finger toward her. "Your television appearance was reckless and unauthorized." Amara maintained her composure, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her charcoal suit. "With respect, sir, transparency is our only path forward. Our clients deserve honesty." 3 board members exchanged worried glances. The quarterly report lay open before them. Numbers in red where they should have been black. Investor calls had tripled overnight, most demanding explanations about the bank's handling of discrimination allegations. "You've put everything at risk," another director added. "Decades of reputation building gone." The executive straightened her shoulders. "What I put at risk was a system that failed too many people for too long. What I'm offering is a chance to rebuild something better." She opened her leather portfolio and distributed copies of a comprehensive reform plan. These changes will restore confidence, not just from investors, but from the communities we serve. A tense silence followed as the board members scanned the document. Amara didn't flinch under their scrutiny. She had anticipated this resistance, prepared for it. This moment would determine whether the institution could truly transform. Meanwhile, across the building, David Johnson paced nervously outside the security director's office. After years of following orders without question, the guard was about to propose something that could change his entire career trajectory. "Come in," called a voice from inside. Johnson entered, clutching a folder containing his meticulously drafted security protocol. The weight of his uniform felt different today, not a burden of authority, but a responsibility he was finally embracing. "Sir, I've developed a new approach to client interactions," he began, his voice steadier than he expected. "It emphasizes de-escalation techniques and cultural sensitivity training for all security personnel." He explained how his proposal would protect both clients and staff by creating clear guidelines for intervention, emphasizing respect and dignity in every interaction. As he spoke, Johnson thought of how he'd frozen when Marcus Carter confronted Amara Williams that fateful day. This could have prevented what happened, he concluded. The director leaned back, studying Johnson with newfound interest. "You've been thinking about this for a while, haven't you?" Johnson nodded. "Every day since it happened, sir." For the first time in his 15 years at the bank, David Johnson felt like more than just a uniform and badge. He was becoming part of the solution. The mahogany-paneled executive suite on the top floor of the Atlanta headquarters had always been a sanctuary for the bank's old guard. Today, 5 senior directors huddled around the conference table, their voices hushed despite the soundproofed walls. Richard Blackwell, the longest-serving board member, tapped his fountain pen against a folder marked "Confidential." "Williams is destroying everything we've built," he muttered. "Oh, these reforms will cost us millions. The shareholders will revolt when they see next quarter's numbers." Eleanor Pritchard, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, nodded in agreement. "I've had 3 calls from major clients threatening to move their portfolios. This inclusivity nonsense is scaring away our premium customers." The directors exchanged knowing glances as Blackwell slid several documents across the polished table. "These internal reports show the projected losses from her community programs. If these numbers were to reach certain financial bloggers, she'd be forced to resign within days," completed Thomas Whitaker, adjusting his silk tie. "The board would have no choice but to remove her." Meanwhile, Patricia Bennett was returning from the copy room when she noticed the unusual gathering. Slowing her pace, she lingered near the partially open door, her heart racing as fragments of conversation reached her ears. The assistant had worked at the bank for 15 years, long enough to recognize a coup in progress. Patricia clutched her tablet to her chest, mind racing. Her career had been built on discretion and loyalty to the institution. Yet in recent months, she had witnessed Amara's tireless efforts to transform the bank into something better, something just. Without hesitation, she sent a cryptic text message to Amara Williams. "Emergency, meet me in the east stairwell, now." 5 minutes later, the 2 women stood in the seldom-used staircase, their voices barely above whispers, as Patricia revealed what she'd overheard. "They're planning to leak selective financial projections," she explained. "Without context, the numbers look devastating." Amara leaned against the railing, her normally composed face showing a flash of vulnerability. "They've been waiting for this opportunity since day one." "What will you do?" Patricia asked. "Not what will I do," Amara replied, straightening her shoulders. "What will we do?" In that fluorescent-lit stairwell, an alliance was formed. Patricia would monitor the director's communications, while Amara prepared a comprehensive financial report showing the long-term benefits of their reforms. "This won't be the last attack," Amara warned, her voice steady despite the threat. And they'll try to isolate us, turn the staff against each other. Patricia nodded, newfound determination in her eyes. Then we'll need to be smarter, faster, and absolutely united. The two women clasped hands briefly, a silent pact to protect not just each other, but the vision of a bank that served all its customers with dignity. The bombshell dropped on a rainy Tuesday morning. Amara Williams sat motionless at her desk, staring at the internal audit report that Patricia Bennett had just placed before her. The numbers told a story so damning it took her breath away. Branch profitability targets were directly linked to metrics that discouraged services to high-maintenance, low-yield demographics, corporate speak that thinly veiled systematic discrimination against minority customers. "Have you shown this to anyone else?" Amara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Patricia shook her head. "Only Sarah Evans knows. She's the one who connected the dots." Within hours, Amara called an emergency meeting with the auditing team. The conference room buzzed with tension as Sarah Evans methodically walked everyone through her findings. She'd discovered that branches serving predominantly black neighborhoods had been given impossible targets that could only be met by turning away certain customers or charging them higher fees. "This isn't just unethical," Sarah explained, pointing to her meticulously organized spreadsheets on the screen. "It's potentially illegal." The revelations spread through the bank like wildfire. By afternoon, staff members were huddled in break rooms, their voices a mixture of shock, anger, and vindication. Many had suspected something was wrong, but never had the proof. Tom Harris paced his office, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, sir, I understand the sensitivity. But we can't ignore this," he insisted to the board chairman. "Williams is right. We need to act decisively." The following day, 3 high-ranking executives were escorted from the building. Their departures were officially labeled as early retirements and career transitions. But everyone knew the truth. The architects of the discriminatory policies were being held accountable. Amara didn't stop there. In a bold move that surprised even her supporters, she issued a press release calling for an independent investigation by a respected civil rights attorney. "We cannot truly move forward without acknowledging where we've failed," she stated firmly during the press conference. David Johnson watched the broadcast from the security desk, a smile spreading across his face. "That's leadership," he told a colleague, remembering how he'd once hesitated to stand up for what was right. The community response was immediate. Local business owners who had long complained about unfair treatment reached out to offer support. Church leaders praised the transparency. Even some skeptical employees began to see Amara in a new light. "She could have buried this," Michael Reed remarked to Sarah over coffee. "Most executives would have." Sarah nodded, thinking about the risks Amara was taking. "That's why this might actually change things," she replied. "Oh, she's not just managing a crisis, she's confronting the truth." As winter crept in, frost etched delicate patterns on the bank's glass doors. Amara Williams sat in the boardroom, adjusting her navy blazer while reviewing her notes one final time. The mahogany table, usually surrounded by executives in power suits, would today host leaders from Atlanta's historic black churches, a meeting unprecedented in the bank's history. "They're here, Miss Williams," Patricia Bennett announced, her voice carrying a note of pride as she ushered in 7 distinguished community leaders. Amara rose to greet them, shaking hands with Reverend James Thornton of Ebenezer Baptist and Sister Mary Collins from Mount Zion AME. The atmosphere shifted from corporate formality to something more sacred as these pillars of the community took their seats. "Thank you for coming," Amara began. "Today isn't about press releases or photo opportunities. I need to hear your truths." For the next 3 hours, stories flowed across the polished table. Reverend Thornton spoke of elderly parishioners who'd been denied mortgages despite perfect credit scores. Sister Collins described young entrepreneurs whose business loans were rejected without explanation. Each narrative painted a picture of systemic exclusion spanning generations. "My grandfather kept his money under his mattress until the day he died," shared Pastor Wilson, his deep voice resonating in the hushed room, not because he didn't understand banking, but because banks didn't understand him. Amara took meticulous notes, occasionally glancing at Tom Harris, who sat quietly in the corner. The regional manager's expression had transformed from professional interest to genuine distress as the stories accumulated. When the meeting concluded, the church leaders departed with cautious hope. Amara remained at the table, staring at pages filled with decades of institutional failure. "I had no idea," Tom finally said, breaking the silence. "The scope of it, now you do," she replied simply. The following week, Tom Harris surprised his colleagues by presenting a comprehensive regional campaign for financial education and inclusion. His proposal included Saturday workshops in community centers, simplified loan applications in multiple languages, and mentorship programs pairing experienced bankers with first-time business owners. "This isn't charity," he explained to skeptical executives. "It's sound business strategy. These communities represent untapped markets with enormous potential." Behind closed doors, Tom confessed to Amara that the church leaders' stories had changed him. "I always thought fairness and profit were opposing forces," he admitted. "Now I see they're interdependent." As December's chill deepened, posters for the Banking for Everyone initiative appeared across Atlanta. Tom Harris, once focused solely on quarterly targets, now spoke passionately about economic justice in branch meetings. The man who had once hesitated to rock the boat was now helping to steer it toward uncharted but promising waters. The feedback portal that Amara Williams had implemented was proving more revolutionary than anyone had anticipated. Within weeks, it had transformed from a simple complaint system into a vibrant community platform where small business owners could share their experiences and seek guidance. Among them was Tasha Robinson, a 26-year-old fashion designer whose bold, African-inspired streetwear had garnered local attention, but whose financial struggles had kept her talent confined to a cramped apartment studio. "I've been rejected by 7 banks in 18 months, Tasha wrote in her post, detailing how she'd been told her business was too risky, despite her growing customer base and solid business plan. "I just need someone to believe in me." Amara read the post late one evening while reviewing the day's feedback. Something in Tasha's determination reminded her of her own journey. Without hesitation, she forwarded the application to the newly formed community development team with a personal note attached. 3 days later, Tasha Robinson became the first recipient of the bank's microloan initiative. The modest sum, $5,000, wasn't enormous by banking standards, but it was enough to secure her first small production space and purchase industrial sewing equipment. "This isn't just about money," Amara told her team during the approval meeting. "It's about dignity and opportunity. Every Tasha Robinson we help today creates ripples we can't even imagine." Meanwhile, Sarah Evans and Michael Reed had been meeting regularly at a quiet coffee shop 6 blocks from the bank's headquarters. Their professional collaboration had blossomed into something more personal. But tonight their focus was entirely on the explosive findings from Sarah's data analysis. "Look at this pattern," Sarah said, sliding her laptop across the table. The journalist leaned forward, his eyes widening as he scrolled through the spreadsheet. The bank systematically buried customer complaints from certain zip codes. Some were never even entered into the system. Michael whistled softly. "How far back does this go?" "At least 7 years, she replied. "Possibly longer, but the digital records only start then." Their exposé, published the following week in the Atlanta Tribune, sent shockwaves through the banking community, with irrefutable evidence that hundreds of valid complaints had been deliberately suppressed. The bank had no choice but to announce a comprehensive review of all past cases. For Sarah, watching the bank publicly acknowledge the findings brought a mixture of vindication and apprehension. She knew her role in the leak would eventually be discovered. But as Michael gently squeezed her hand under the table during the press conference, she felt certain that standing for truth had been worth the risk. The boardroom at the regional headquarters buzzed with tension as shareholders filed in, their faces grim with determination. After weeks of negative press coverage and plummeting stock values, the extraordinary assembly had been called to address the crisis that had begun with a single phone call months earlier. Amara Williams sat at the edge of the room, her navy suit as immaculate as ever. She watched as the chairman fumbled through his opening remarks, his usual confidence shattered by the weight of public scrutiny. The data Sarah Evans had uncovered had made its way to major financial publications, leaving the board with nowhere to hide. "The evidence of systemic discrimination is irrefutable," announced a silver-haired investor, rising from her seat. "This institution requires new leadership that understands the communities we serve." The vote that followed sent shockwaves through Atlanta's financial district. 4 senior directors, including 2 who had actively undermined Amara's reforms, were removed from their positions. In their place, the shareholders elected advocates who had built careers on transparency and community investment. "This isn't just about optics," Tom Harris whispered to Amara as the results were announced. "This is real change." The regional manager had become one of her strongest allies. His initial hesitation transformed into genuine commitment. Later that week, Patricia Bennett stood nervously before her colleagues in the training center. After years as Amara's assistant, she now wore a new badge, identifying her as Director of Leadership Development. Her journey from the woman who had once hesitated over the send button to the architect of the bank's new frontline training program symbolized the transformation taking place. "I remained silent for too long," Patricia admitted to the room of attentive staff members. But what I've learned from Amara Williams is that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it." David Johnson sat in the front row, nodding in agreement. The security guard, who had once frozen in uncertainty, now volunteered to share his experiences in Patricia's training sessions, helping new employees understand the importance of standing up for what's right. Throughout the bank's branches, employees who had witnessed Patricia's promotion began sharing their own stories. A teller from the East Side branch reported discriminatory lending practices. A loan officer admitted to being pressured to reject qualified applicants from certain neighborhoods. As Amara reviewed these reports in her office, she felt a cautious optimism. The institution wouldn't change overnight, but the foundation was being laid. The board that had once sought her removal now looked to her for guidance, and employees who had feared speaking up were finding their voices. The transformation had begun with one decisive phone call, but it would continue through hundreds of smaller, braver choices every day. Amara Williams stared at the spreadsheet on her device, the numbers confirming what she already knew. Meaningful change would require painful sacrifices. The luxury banking services that had catered to Atlanta's elite for decades, personal bankers, after-hours appointments, and complimentary financial planning would need to be scaled back dramatically to fund the community initiatives she'd promised. "They're going to revolt," Patricia Bennett warned, sliding a stack of complaint letters across the desk. "The Henderson family is threatening to move their 8-figure portfolio to First National." Amara nodded, her expression resolute. "Let them. We can't serve everyone equally while maintaining a 2-tier system." The backlash came swiftly. Wealthy clients, who had enjoyed preferential treatment for years, arrived at the Peachtree Avenue branch to find their exclusive lounge converted into a small business resource center. Many stormed out, cell phones pressed to ears as they called competitors. Tom Harris entered her office without knocking, his face flushed. "The board is getting hammered with calls. We've lost 23 million in deposits since Monday, and gained 31 million from new small business accounts," Amara countered, sliding her tablet toward him. "The numbers support what we're doing." The hardest decision came the following week. The West Side branch had consistently underperformed in community engagement metrics. Rather than shutting it down permanently, Amara announced a 3-month closure for intensive staff retraining and renovation into a financial education hub. "You're putting 20 people temporarily out of work," David Johnson said during the security briefing. "There's already talk of protests." He wasn't wrong. By afternoon, a small but vocal group gathered outside headquarters, their signs condemning the closure. Local news vans lined the street as Amara cut executive bonuses by 30%, including her own. Sarah Evans knocked softly on Amara's door that evening, finding her still at her desk. "The data supports you," she said, placing a folder between them. "But the human cost is real too." Amara rubbed her temples. "Every victory demands sacrifice. I just never expected to be making so many enemies." "You're making more allies," Sarah insisted. "Michael's latest article has generated hundreds of supportive comments." Outside, the protesters' chants grew louder as darkness fell. Amara stood at her window, watching them. For every person demanding she reverse course, there were dozens of families who would benefit from these difficult changes. "We stay the course," she said finally, turning back to her desk. Real transformation was never going to be easy or popular. As she gathered her belongings to leave, Amara knew tomorrow would bring more difficult choices. But she also knew that every sacrifice brought them one step closer to the bank she envisioned, one that truly served all of Atlanta. Frost clung to the windows of the flagship branch on Peachtree Avenue as employees gathered in the marble lobby, their breath visible in the December chill. Amara Williams stood where it had all begun 6 months earlier, her navy suit replaced by a deep burgundy one that commanded attention without demanding it. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice steady as she gestured toward the projection screen behind her. "These aren't just numbers, they're our story." The data appeared in clean, undeniable graphs. Loan approval rates that had once varied by neighborhood now converging toward equity. Customer satisfaction scores rising across all demographics, and complaint resolution times cut by 60%. "We made mistakes," Amara continued, scrolling through slides that didn't hide uncomfortable truths. "For years, we buried complaints. We created barriers. We failed people who trusted us." The room grew still as she showed redacted examples of discrimination that had once been routine. Patricia Bennett watched from the front row, pride swelling in her chest. The woman she'd once merely assisted now led with a vision that had transformed not just the bank, but Patricia's own career trajectory. "But look at where we are now," Amara said, her voice softening as she revealed the progress metrics. Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd as they saw tangible evidence of their collective work. Her composure briefly faltered as she switched to a faded photograph of an elderly woman behind a market stall. "My grandmother Ruth sold vegetables every Sunday at the West End market for 37 years, she said, tears gathering in her eyes. She was denied a business loan 17 times, but every week she showed up with dignity, with purpose." Amara paused, collecting herself. "She taught me that real change isn't about one dramatic moment. It's about showing up, day after day, even when it's hard. The executive looked across the faces before her, some who had stood with her from the beginning, others who had come around slowly. Dignity and endurance. That's our foundation. As applause filled the lobby, David Johnson stepped forward from his position near the entrance. The security guard, who had once hesitated, now stood tall. "Miss Williams," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room, "I want to thank you. That day, I froze when I should have spoken up." He swallowed hard. "You gave me the courage to find my voice." Amara reached out, clasping his hand firmly. "We found our voices together, David." In that moment, beneath the grand chandeliers that had witnessed both injustice and redemption, something profound had come full circle. 6 months after that fateful call, the flagship branch on Peachtree Avenue had transformed beyond recognition. Where tension once hung in the air like a storm cloud, warm greetings now welcomed every client who walked through the doors. The marble floors still gleamed, but they no longer felt cold and intimidating. Amara Williams stood at the entrance, watching with quiet satisfaction as a young entrepreneur excitedly discussed her business plan with a loan officer. The Dignity First Fund, launched 3 months earlier, had already helped 42 local businesses get off the ground. Most were owned by people who would have been shown the door under the old regime. Patricia Bennett had blossomed in her new role heading the leadership program. The once cautious assistant now commanded attention in meetings, training frontline staff to recognize and address unconscious bias. Her journey from silent observer to outspoken advocate inspired many who had previously kept their heads down. Tom Harris had left the bank 2 weeks ago. His departure was amicable. He'd taken a position with a non-profit focused on financial literacy in underserved communities. The experience had changed him, stripped away his corporate armor and revealed the compassionate man beneath. In his farewell email, he'd thanked Amara for the difficult lessons she'd taught him. Sarah Evans's data analysis had become the backbone of the bank's transformation. Her partnership with Michael Reed had produced a series of articles that forced the entire banking industry to confront its demons. Their relationship had deepened too. They now shared both professional passion and personal connection. David Johnson approached Amara with a smile. No longer the hesitant security guard, but the confident head of the newly formed Client Safety and Dignity team. "Miss Williams," he said, "the community outreach event is all set for Saturday. We've got twice the RSVPs we expected." Amara nodded, remembering how far they'd come. There had been costs, the stock price was still recovering, and several wealthy clients had taken their business elsewhere. But for every account lost, 3 new ones had opened. Ruth Williams, Amara's aunt, had become a regular visitor, bringing community elders to financial literacy workshops. Her presence reminded everyone that the struggle for dignity spanned generations. As Amara looked out over her team, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Real transformation was never easy. It required courage, sacrifice, and persistence. But watching a mother open her child's first savings account without fear or hesitation, Amara knew that every difficult moment had been worth it. The bank wasn't just a building of marble and glass anymore. It had become a true cornerstone of the community.